Hello, my name is Gaius. I'm doing my project on the attack on Fort Sumter, which happened in April 1861. Okay, let's start off with where the fort is. So if I swap to my map view, you can see that the Fort Sumter is in Charleston, South Carolina, which is one of the slave states. The reason for Fort Sumter being attacked, or one of the reasons for it being attacked, is because before the attack, this harbor was controlled by the Union, even though it is in South Carolina, which at the time was a slave state. The Union had set up a blockade prior to the attack, which was a major issue for the Confederates because they needed to move items. They needed to be able to trade with other people, but having this blockade made it very difficult for them to move items. So the reason why Fort Sumter was a strategic position is because if they took over this fort, they have access to this harbor, and having access to this harbor created a hole in that Union blockade. I'm not sure specifically why controlling this access point created a hole in that blockade. All I know is it did, and it would be a major advantage for Confederates if they took it. Okay, now that you know where Fort Sumter is, let's move on to when the attack on Fort Sumter happened. As I mentioned before, the attack on Fort Sumter occurred in April 1861. Specifically the 12th. But the attack wasn't the only important thing that happened on that date. The other thing that happened was the start of the Civil War. Now you may be thinking, those two dates match up perfectly, so what's going on? Well, just so happens that the attack on Fort Sumter started the Civil War. It was the reason why the North and the South went to war. Now that you have an understanding of when the attack happened and its kind of relation to the start of the war, we can go on and talk about the two sides in the fight. During this fight, you have the two sides, the Confederates and the Union. The Confederates were the states or people that believed that slavery was right and it was okay. The Union were the people that believed that slavery was wrong and it should be outlawed. It also should be noted that Abraham Lincoln was the president of the Union, or the United States at the time. Now that we know where, when, and who, we can now talk about what exactly happened. Now we know it was an attack on the fort, but it's a bit more specific than that. The fort had been running low on supplies for a few months now, and the Confederates and the Union were well aware of this. Because it was in a Confederate state, it was a difficult decision to send them supplies. Abraham Lincoln, the president at the time, decided to resupply them because they only had about 6 weeks of supplies left. Not enough to make the fort survive. The Confederates caught word of this, and upon hearing that the fort was on low supplies, they knew if they started an attack on the fort, the soldiers on the inside would eventually run out of food and resort to surrendering. And the Confederates were right. After 2 days of constant barrage from artillery, the fort surrendered. The commander had realized they could not keep up this fight and surrendered peacefully to the Confederates. No one was killed during the fight, but 2 were killed afterwards in some sort of artillery salute. After the Confederates took the fort, they held the fort for about 4 years after the attack. Then it was given up, I think, due to the end of the war, in which the Union took it back. So yeah, that's my interpretation of the attack on Fort Sumter. I hope I didn't miss anything. Otherwise, my grade is going to suffer. Thank you for watching.